Welcome back to another episode of Excuse My Grandma. It's Kim and my co-host,
Grandma Gail.
Grandma, what is new in your life? I feel like we've both been very busy.
What's new in my life is that I've been recognized in the supermarket, and I have to put makeup on at 7:30 in the morning because of our Excuse My Grandma and the TikToks.
That's why I get nervous now too. Like I love when I went out in the Hamptons last weekend, and so many people at the bars were like. Which I love. Like I love when people go up to me, and I actually forgot to tell you. People were like, "Tell Grandma Gail we love her." Like it was so cute.
Well, it's fine if you're dressed up and look
exactly.
nice.
So love it at the bar, but then
but not in the supermarket at 7:30.
Yeah, now I get anxiety. Not that we don't get recognized that often, but like I'm like, what if I just am like? Usually I roll out of the house in actual like clothes from 4th grade. Like what if someone sees me?
You better not, because you've got an image to uphold now, sweetheart.
I know. So also when I was out the other day, someone told me about this app called Strava, where it's like you go on a run and you can like tell people about, like you post how long it was and a picture of your run or whatever. So, but it was funny because like my friend is on it and she was like, it's basically like a dating app, because you could be like, I went on a 5-mile run, and then guys will like talk to you on there.
Well, if it's another way of meeting someone, Kimmy, it's fine. I mean, yeah, I don't know if you can go on a 5-mile run, but you probably could.
Yeah.
You walk a million miles.
No, it would be embarrassing mine. I feel like I would be like, I took a 2-mile walk, and people feel like, okay. Cool.
There's nothing wrong with a 2-mile walk. It's just perfectly all right.
True. Okay, then another thing I heard about, there's a Facebook group called Are We Dating the Same Guy in New York?
Oh no.
And everyone posts on it like, don't go out with this guy. Like I just went on a date with him and XYZ happened. And like everyone's like, it's like this exclusive Facebook group and everyone's talking about.
See, this is what I don't like about all this online stuff, because you know what? The guy probably is perfectly nice, and now you're going to eliminate him because some other girl probably didn't have a good time with him and put a bad thing on Facebook. I don't like all this. It's very upsetting.
But like, I agree. I totally agree that like I think that group sounds a little uncalled for, because just because you didn't like someone doesn't mean someone else would.
It's like Mean Girls.
Yeah, like the burn book. Right. But then sometimes I'm like, well, if they did something actually to put someone's like at risk.
Oh, well, that's different.
Like then they should.
Well, then they should be shamed. No, then they should be shamed.
And I think that's kind of mostly what it is, like things that are just not okay. Or
well,
like
if it's not okay, then remember, don't go.
Yeah, so I don't know. I'm not in it. I'd be interested to like see what people actually write, but my friend was showing me.
Okay.
And then have you heard of this app, Be Real?
No, I have never heard of any apps.
Oh, okay.
I'm lucky I'm on my own app.
It's basically like the new Instagram, Snapchat, like for like, I don't know. I feel like a lot of younger people are using it. But you like
do what?
You you get a notification on your phone once a day, and you have like a 1-minute window to take a selfie.
Oh God,
and then,
more selfies.
I know. And then the rest of the and then all your friends can see it, but I guess it's like it's in real time.
I think that's really for high school and college. I really think by the time you've graduated college, you don't have to be doing selfies all day long. You should be working.
It's once a day.
No, the one's too much.
Yeah. Well, so I was on a date like a week or two ago or whatever, and it came up on the guy's phone. He's like, I gotta take a Be Real. Do you want? And then he was like, come be in my selfie.
I would have to eliminate him. He would be off my list right
away.
Like,
you want me in the video? I'm not on your friends. This is our first date.
I think that's a little bit strange.
I know. Okay. Speaking of dating, our guest this week is a dating coach. His name's Kevin Nahai. He has a big Instagram following, and he has some very interesting rules about dating and personal opinions, some of which I never really disagree with my guests, and you can listen in here. At one point, I was definitely disagreeing with him about a few things. Yeah, so it was an interesting conversation. If you want to hear some like back and forth, we hope you enjoy. Okay, guys, we are joined by Kevin Nahai. He is a dating coach. Kevin, thank you for joining us.
Thank you guys so much for having me on. It's really nice to meet you both.
You as well. So let's start with your age, relationship status, and where you live.
Okay, so age 30, I just turned 30, relationship status, single. I'm dating around, looking for the real deal. And I was born and raised in Los Angeles, California, and I live here today.
I was doing some background research. You have like a rule, right? That you say to only date one person at a time. But that is, so you basically think to be exclusive with just anybody, right? Or can you explain like your rule to us?
Yes. So, no, my rule is not to be exclusive with just anybody. I have what I call a 3-date rule. The 3-date rule is that you can date, let's say you're interested in 2 or 3 different people. You can date those 2 or 3 different people for up to 3 dates each. But after the 3rd date, you should choose which person you want to focus on. If after the 3rd date with, Sam, John, and Eric, you can't decide which person, catches your fancy, then either you're not into any of them, or they're not the right people for you, or you are indecisive, and perhaps you're being too picky, or perhaps you're comparing them to each other. So I sort of created the 3-date rule to allow for the fact that, yes, there's no reason you should be exclusively dating a person starting from the 1st date. Having said that, my philosophy is that if you are dating seriously with a serious intention, marriage, kids, long-term relationship, then you should focus your effort and your energy on one person at a time. That is what I have seen work over and over again. And you don't necessarily have to tell the other person, hey, by the way, I'm only dating you, right? It's just a personal approach that you take as a matter of respect to yourself.
What do you think of that?
Actually, I think it's a pretty good idea. I mean, I think after 3 dates, like Kevin says, you pretty much know if this guy has got anything that appeals to you. If it doesn't, you may as well just say, it's been nice, and go on to the next one.
Whenever I present this idea, like on another podcast that I was on, I got raked over the coals by 50% of the audience, because they couldn't stomach the idea that they would self-limit their options. But then the other 50% of people who I talk to say to me, thank God there's somebody who's still advocating this. It is so useful. Once I started self-limiting my options, and so the irony of this thing is that it's actually fiercely liberating. It is not constraining. And when people hear date one person at a time, they get scared because they think they're going to be constrained. They think they're putting all of their eggs in one basket, but it's quite the opposite. It's actually giving you the biggest chance at success.
So I see your point. I think my thing is more, let's say you're giving 3 guys the 3 dates. You're on like date 2 with one, date 1 with whatever. And then I go out to a bar and I meet someone that I hit it off with. And he's like, do you want to go out to this week? Mm-hmm. Then do I have to say no because I'm giving the other ones a chance still?
No, he's not saying that. As long as it's not past the 3 dates, right, Kevin? If it's up to the 3 dates. If you're only,
but what if I'm on date 1 with the other guys and I'm like, I haven't met this guy yet. He could be good. I don't know.
Look, here's the thing. It's not a hard and fast rule where you say, do I have to say no? Nobody's going to get you in trouble, Kim. Well, maybe Gail will, but I certainly won't. But look, here's the thing. Let's say you're on date 1 or 2 with somebody else. You totally hit it off with them. They're a great prospect. They seem great on paper. You've been having phone calls and texting and FaceTime. Just because you meet a cool guy in a bar, do you really need to add him into the mix? Do you want to be juggling 4 different guys? If on the other hand, you went on one date with a guy and it wasn't particularly interesting, and within the next couple of weeks, you have a couple dates lined up and you're cool about them, but they don't seem that great. And then you spend 2 hours at a bar talking with a guy and having a great conversation. Of course, in that case, you should give him your number because he's the person who you seem to have the most in common with and you have a good connection with him, right? Mm-hmm. So it's more a concept than it is a hard and fast rule.
Right. Do you think men think about it the same way, Kevin? I mean, girls or women are very precise in what they want. I wonder if a guy who's 30 years old or 29 years old or 35 really is thinking more than maybe I'd like to go to bed with her.
Well,
I'm not sure the constraints are the same on the male side. They're going to give her 3 times, and if she doesn't go to bed with me, goodbye. I wonder.
Well, hold on. This is totally different from the going to bed with somebody thing. I'm not saying that I would never ever say that after 3 dates you should go to bed with somebody, whether you're a guy or a girl. I would actually say quite the opposite.
Yeah, but I'm not sure the guys are going to hang around, and which is fine. But a lot of men want to have whatever they want. They want sex. They want a one night stand, and then you'll know if this guy is really not for you. Then you can say goodbye. It's not for me. But I wonder if the psyche for the guy is the same. Are they sitting around?
No, the psyche for guys and girls and their approach in dating and their precision in dating and how conscientious they are about what they want, those things for men and women are very different.
Yeah.
However, right. So you're right that they're different. However, if a guy, there's 2 sort of schools of thought here. One of them I think is correct, and the other I think could not be more flawed. The one that I think is not be more flawed is the school of thought says, sleep with a guy on the 2nd or 3rd date to weed him out. If he sticks around, you know he wants you. If he doesn't, you know he's gone.
I don't know if
that isn't
that one.
Oh, I mean, I have clients and friends who it makes sense, right? Because it's what Gail was just saying, like, this way you're going to find out if he's really if he wants to stick around or not. But my school of thought is withhold any kind of intimate sexual experience until there is a commitment, until you know each other spiritually, emotionally, intellectually, until you are certain that this is somebody you at least want to continue dating. Because if a guy doesn't make it to that point where the commitment has been established or where the emotional connection hasn't been established, that's how you know that he wants to stick around, right? And you didn't have to give of yourself in the most intense and intimate way possible to find that out.
Mm-hmm. I do think sometimes it's confusing whether you're compatible because maybe you have to first see if there's some sort of sexual chemistry, but maybe do you think that's something you could find out before actually doing anything, just by the vibe? Or because I feel like if you're gonna say, oh, I'm gonna be exclusive with this person, you kind of do have to know that at some level.
Yeah, that's a good point. Look, I've never had a situation where I've had an extremely strong emotional connection with somebody and the physical connection was terrible.
Right.
That has never happened to me. Usually you can feel tension building. You can, feel that you're building closer and closer to that point. You can feel spiritually and emotionally connected to somebody. And when you do, you may not be having sex like something out of a porn scene, right? But you're going to have a strong physical connection.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes sense. And then, I guess going back a little bit, because you were talking about difference between advice for men and advice for women, as a dating coach, are most of your clients women, or how did you kind of decide who to take on?
So it is usually 70% women, 30% men, sometimes 60-40. Mm-hmm. That is usually because women are just more prone to working on themselves, unfortunately, than men are. But it's definitely a mix. I don't only do dating coaching. I work on a lot of different areas as well. So I have some women
started on the dating business, on the, what would you call it?
The
matchmaking.
Business of love.
Business of love. I mean, did you study it in college? Were you a psych major? What qualifies you to do this?
Sure. So I don't do any matchmaking, by the way. I've never actually made a match. I've made 91 successful marriages, engagements, or relationships in the last 3 years.
Very good.
Thank you. Yeah, it's getting to 100, but not one of them have I ever set 2 people up, which is interesting. But yeah, so in college, I studied communication and psychology. I went to graduate school. I did an MSW social work. I got 9 different coaching certifications. But, basically the way that I got into this was that I had a really dysfunctional, painful, toxic relationship, after which I realized that as much as the girl that I dated had all sorts of problems, I chose that. And when I realized that I chose that, I started pulling back the curtain. This was several years ago, around 24, 25. And I realized that I had all sorts of abandonment issues and trauma and codependency and, unbridled anxious attachment and all sorts of things from my childhood, from my relationship with my parents, from various issues that I had been through that were now rearing their ugly head in the context of my romantic relationships. And it was so painful, and it was such an eye-opening experience.
How did you then do the work on yourself
He had to really sit down and think about what the issues were. That's the first thing. Why would he be attracted to somebody like his ex-girlfriend or whatever she was? And he had to work backwards. He had to see, why was he attracted to that? And as Kevin was saying, there were issues in his background that was causing that. And so
can you do that work though by yourself, or like you need to be in therapy? Like, what would you say to people?
I think that you can gain a lot of self-awareness by yourself if you're willing to look in the mirror. You can read a lot of books. You can, listen to podcasts, and there's a ton of free information out there that if you're really willing to hold up the mirror, you will learn a lot about yourself. I think that the challenge where you really need somebody in your corner is when it comes to, how do I turn this around? And that's really where you need to have an objective set of eyes. So whether that is a mentor or a therapist or a coach or a counselor, anybody who can kind of say, look, I've walked the road, I've been there. That's where it's incredibly helpful. And, I would say that it's incredibly helpful, even if you're not at the stage where you're wondering, what do I do about this? But even if you're wondering, how did I get here? Like, you can technically learn a lot about yourself on your own, but for some people, if they have their blinders up or if they lack humility, they really need to be in therapy or coaching in order to have those things brought to their attention.
I feel like we talk about it a lot, that like, it seems that me and my peers or whatever are seeking out advice a lot, whether it's from therapy or podcasts or whatever it is. And my grandma always says, like, no one really kind of talked about it as much when she was younger. From your standpoint, like, how do you think dating and relationships have changed from generation to generation?
Well, drastically.
Yeah, I think they've changed drastically. I mean, that's a great question for your grandma, because she's been there to see the change. I can only make an inference from talking to the older generation as opposed to seeing it for myself. But here's what I think. I think it's changed drastically in 100 ways, but here's what I think is the essential difference. What it really all boils down to. In our parents' and grandparents' generation, the messaging was essentially find a good partner and figure out your lives together.
Correct.
The message to our generation, which I think has royally screwed us up, is, there's also an upside, but I think for the most part, it's royally screwed us up, is figure out your life, figure out your career, then go find a partner.
Correct.
Now, that's royally screwed us up. It's obvious. Just look around. We've got a lot to sort out in our romantic relationships. The upside of it, of course, is that if the timing is right, and if we have basically, if we strike gold, then the upside is that we know more about ourselves when we choose a partner, and presumably we have a lower chance of staying in an unhappy marriage for 60 years. So like, my grandparents were married for 63 years. My late grandfather passed a year ago. I don't think that the majority of that 63 years, they had a good or happy marriage, right?
Right.
Because they got married when they were like 16 and 20, okay, which is way too young. Mm-hmm. So in our generation, Kim, I'm 30, you're 26. We know a lot more about ourselves, right? So if we can find the right person, and if the timing and the stars align, and if we make good decisions, then we can choose a better partner. And that was something that perhaps our grandparents' generation didn't have the luxury of.
Mm-hmm.
But there's also a huge downside to it, which is that the value of finding a long-term partner at a young age and building a life with them has not been instilled in us, which means that we don't start looking until we're 30. And that brings a whole host of issues that every year after 30 becomes harder and harder to combat.
Mm-hmm. So when you say we haven't started looking, like what makes you an active like looker versus just somebody who's dating? Like what is the difference? Because technically you're like dating or hooking up or whatever it is, probably from like 18 or younger on. So then you mean just having the mindset of like, okay, I'm only going to date if I can see myself marrying them? Or
Yeah, that's what it really
it's being marriage minded.
Yeah, I agree with that.
If you don't want a legal,
you have to think of that. But certainly by the time you're 25, you're not supposed to be just dating anybody. If it's not going to be a long-term relationship and end up with marriage.
But then how do you judge somebody before you've even gone out with them of whether they're marriage material? I feel like that's slippery.
Can tell. You can tell.
Well, no. So first of all, I'm not saying that you should constantly be sussing out if someone else is marriage material. I'm saying that you should make yourself marriage material, right? So when you say what determines whether or not somebody is quote unquote looking or if they're looking appropriately, it's not an external search, Kim. It's an internal evolution. So being marriage minded does not mean that every person you go out with, you're saying, is this marriage material? Well, I couldn't decide that in the first date. So bye, Felicia, right? It means that you are living in accordance with your values. It means that you're developing your principles. It means that you're not hooking up with people randomly. It means that you're not getting drunk. It means that you're not prioritizing your career over everything, but you're making room for dating in your life. So when you say like, yeah, from 18 or 20, you could be hooking up and dating people, right? That doesn't make you marriage minded. That's like when you're young and you're having your fun and stuff. By the way, a lot of that fun is what contributes to having a difficult dating life in your later 20s. So, well, because the more quote unquote fun we have in our early 20s, the greater the potential there is for emotional damage to accrue. Especially,
well, let's say you had great sex. I understand exactly what Kevin's saying. Let's say you had great sex when you were 20. You had the best time you ever had, and he was terrific, or she was terrific. But that was never going anywhere. It was finished. It was over. Now you're 26, 27, 28, 29, and you're going out with a guy, and you eventually like him, but now you have an intimate relationship, and it wasn't as good as you remember when you were 20. Now what do? Now you're up the river because you're never going to have that.
That's not a thing that when you're older, you're worse at.
No, sex. Not worse. I'm saying, but you're comparing. I think what Kevin is saying is,
well, that's one possibility.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
The comparison is one thing that can set you back, but that's not really the crux of the issue. The crux of the issue is that, especially for women, the higher your quote unquote body count, right? The higher the number of people that you have slept with, the harder it is to establish a long-term pair bond with a male partner.
No way.
Yes, you can look this up.
But then you're never going to tell, like, you don't have to tell people you're dating your body count.
Wait. I'm not saying because the guy will get mad at you or say, I can't date you. No, I'm saying that the effect of a lot of random sex for women is that emotionally it lowers their ability to pair bond for the future. Mm-hmm. Because every time you have sex with somebody, especially this occurs for men as well, but every time, especially for women, that you have sex with somebody, your brain emits tons and tons, 10 times the normal amount of oxytocin, which is the bonding chemical. Then you walk away or he walks away, it goes away, the relationship fizzles, you become emotionally hurt, you become on a small level traumatized from the loss, and then it makes it very difficult to trust and bond with somebody else. Now, every once in a while you get a girl who has slept with 40 guys,
Oh, well,
and
good for her.
she meets her husband and they ride off into the sunset and she's perfectly fine.
Right.
But that's a girl who has done the work on herself to realize that when she was doing that, she was young and she was stupid and she was insecure and she was using men to validate her and things like that. Right. So
I
this
don't wanna
really does
perpetrate the narrative that like sleeping with a bunch of people means that you're not going to have I see where you're saying like it's a science thing, like, or like whatever these studies are, but I don't think it's like a good narrative to promote or tell people. And I like it if you're like, okay, but then if you do the work, but I don't think the work is like I was dumb and stupid. I think it was like that was a stage of my life and now I'm entering a new stage where I'm looking for something different. But I don't think like looking back and be like, that's a mistake, I shouldn't have slept with this many people. Like, I think that's going to hurt yourself more than anything else.
so. Okay, so here's the thing. What we're talking about here is a prevention mechanism. I am not, so I'm sharing this information for prevention because there's a lot of people who are well into their 30s who are still sleeping around, right? And so, and by the way, the same goes for guys. I don't recommend that guys sleep around. There was a phase in my life when I was sleeping around and I was young and I was stupid and it didn't help me. And I don't mind admitting that, right? Because I've reconciled that part of my past. The purpose of this is not to look back and say, you did something wrong. What's the matter with you? You should shame or blame yourself. The purpose of this is, first of all, if we can prevent that and get more serious about our relationships starting from this day, then A, that's my mission. But B, when you say, I don't like to perpetuate that narrative, unfortunately, it's not a narrative. It's just a fact. The more you sleep around, the harder it is in your late 20s and 30s to find a stable partner. It just makes things more difficult emotionally. So the purpose is not you should, say, oh, I'm such a bad person because I did that. Of course not. Every person is capable of growth and every person is should forgive themselves for whatever their mistakes are. But we do have to understand that from the perspective of being marriage minded, it's not a good idea to have a lot of casual sex. And I don't think that that's really something we can argue with.
Right. I agree with that.
Yeah, I'm just like, I understand it, but then I'm just trying to think of real life situations. And I'm like, if my friend like went home with a random guy at a bar, I don't really think it's like changing whether she's gonna like fall in love with someone tomorrow that she meets.
No,
or like
but it's
have
a little bit of her
successful-
immaturity at some point to be taking somebody.
It also depends the frequency.
Right.
So
Yeah.
if she did that 2 or 3 times throughout her 20s, like whatever, who hasn't done that?
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
But I'm more talking about the extreme examples. Like if you had a friend, Kim, who was going home with a different guy from the bar every weekend, don't tell me that you wouldn't think she's got some insecurity or validation issues going on.
Definitely. There would be something happening internally, but I don't know if it would then necessarily mean like I think it's almost okay. So what I think it is like whatever that thing that she's battling, whether it's insecurity or whatever it is, like that's what's keeping her from finding a future partner. It's not the fact that, oh, she's sleeping around and like oxytocin is everywhere and then now she can't.
Well, but it's the same thing. You're basically
it's both. It is both. It is both the physical act and the physical act of allowing somebody into your body and building that intimacy with them. Even if you want to compartmentalize, you can't. It is the physical act. And then it is also the emotional turmoil that is underlying the act, right? So here's another example. If I'm a drug addict and I spend 10 years of my life injecting heroin into myself, can I still have a very successful and stable future as a lawyer or a doctor? Absolutely. But if I spent 10 years injecting heroin, I'm going to have health issues later on in life. That's a science. That's a fact. I'm going to need to get over the emotional issues that caused me to take the heroin in the first place. Now, I am not equating casual sex with heroin, right? But I'm giving the example that if you spend a lot of years having casual sex because it's coming from a place of lack or worth or lack of self-worth, that can have an effect. And B, you have to ask yourself, what was going on with me emotionally that I felt the need to do that? It doesn't make you a bad person.
Right. Yeah, totally understand that as well. But again, and then we can go to the next topic, but heroin is like a drug that can kill you. Like sex is.
Well, sex
not.
is a drug too.
So, yeah.
Sex is a drug. It's a crutch.
It's definitely a drug. And if
sex is a crutch.
If it's used improperly, it's destructive. And it not every relationship has to be always all about sex, which is what good relationship has many, many different facets. Yeah. And you have to put it, one probably needs to be in the relationship as well as being able to talk to somebody, being able to have commonality of interest, but it's one part of a puzzle. I don't think it's the only thing. If you only have sex, you're going to have nothing else. You're going to end up getting divorced.
Right. And look, like your grandma is right. Like there are situations where you have a great sex life with somebody, you're not sleeping around. Maybe you only sleep with one partner, but you're terrible at communication. Then the sex thing is perfectly fine and you've got a healthy sex life there, but you don't know how to communicate. So that could be the issue, right? So I'm by no means saying that how you treat sex is going to be the single determining factor beyond whether or not that determines whether or not you have a successful relationship. It's just one of the things that we treat way too lightly and way too casually, and we don't understand that there are potential consequences.
Yeah.
And I also just want to be sensitive to say one thing, which is I am not a proponent of girls can't sleep around, but guys can. Yeah, I think that's BS.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
But that sounds right, Kevin. It's good for the goose, it's good for the gander. Neither one do you want to have a guy who's sleeping around 24/7, and you don't want a woman who's sleeping around 24/7.
Exactly. And essentially the mistake that happened in our society was we said, okay, well, guys are doing it, so girls should too.
Mm-hmm.
And that's wrong. You don't answer bad behavior with bad behavior, right? It's bad behavior when guys are sleeping around all the time. So it's not that women should start doing it too. It's that men should be gentlemen, right? And they should be smarter. And, so we actually should have taken a page out of the women's book in this case.
Well, I think it's only bad behavior if you're saying that the goal is to have like a successful like relationship or whatever. Like if your goal is just to like do you and you don't really want to be like a monogamous person, then it's not really bad behavior.
Yeah. Everything I'm talking about, that's a good clarification. Everything I'm talking about here is in the context of, having a long-term relationship, because I would never say that, a polyamorous relationship is bad, or if you want to just have sex just for fun, it's bad. Like, it's not for me to say what anybody should or shouldn't do.
Yeah, no, I think it's an important distinction. What are some things that you think are maybe like dating myths from previous generations? Like anything that you hear my grandma's generation or our parents' generation saying where you're like, that's just not relevant anymore?
I think one of them that I haven't made my mind up about this, but maybe it's an interesting discussion. The idea that you should keep the marriage together at all costs. I don't know how I feel about this one, because that's a very prevalent message that my grandparents and my parents got. Both of them are immigrants and we're Jewish, so we're very family oriented. I think on the one hand, we have a 60% divorce rate in this country. That means that if you lined up 10 people in a room, 6 of them will be divorced. That is frightening, right? One thing that I take from the older generation that I think really should be more relevant to our generation. I don't think we fully understood this concept, which it's the concept that the only things you're going to find in another person are trust, respect, honesty. They have a good life. Right. Everything else has to be created. So when people in our generation, Kim, are looking for relationships, we are looking for someone who is a good communicator, is funny, is affectionate, is warm, meets all of our love languages. We are looking for somebody who comes ready-made to to meet our physical, intellectual, and emotional needs. And I am guilty of this as well, right? I had, it kind of dawned on me about a year ago that one of the reasons I wasn't meeting my partner, you know, whoever my soulmate is, was that everything that I was looking for, something that is so specific, and I'm trying to create this mythical unicorn that was ready made for Kevin. Like she was made in a factory and has everything that I want right off the bat. And now what I understand is that the things I'm going to find in her are someone who is trustworthy, kind, honest, perhaps comes from a good family, perhaps has good values. But everything else that I'm going to have with her are things that I have to teach her and she has to teach me, and we have to compromise on, and we have to co-create.
Right. But I think, Kevin, that you only learn as you get older. I don't think you can almost translate that, what you just said, to a 25-year-old or a 26-year-old.
Well, Kim's 26. What do you think, Kim?
Well, Kimmy listens to this all the time, so she can. But most people
I would
out
give more
there,
credit to people in their mid-20s.
You think so? I don't think they're willing to handle.
I think maybe what the difference is instead of being like, these are my 3 to 4 points that are kind of like non-negotiables. I think a lot of us put like a lot of weight on, well, I have this connection with somebody, so I'm going to either throw those 3 things out the window or
those 3 things that important.
No, but you need to have at least 3 things, because then otherwise anyone's fair game. Like then that's saying, okay, anyone that you go out with, you can turn like
yeah,
no,
probably.
because you have to have, that's settling. Like you have to have some level of like what you need.
Well, but you need somebody for your needs. It's supposed to be a combination together that you make a good combination. I think if you're looking for someone to fulfill your inadequacies, you're never going to.
No, it's not fulfilling your inadequacies. It's like like, as you were saying, like someone, you want someone family oriented. That's so important to you, whatever. You want somebody who
likes to play golf.
No, well, I think that's something that you can change, I think, or like that you can
so that's actually a perfect example, right? Yeah. So if you want someone who's family oriented, they have to come ready made.
Exactly.
Because that's not something you can teach them. That's a value that they grew up with.
Right.
Right. Or if they didn't grow up with a value with that, it's a value they cultivated on their own. But if you want someone who can hang out with you on the golf course, that may be something you have to teach them and guide them and see if they take an interest in.
Right. Or give up.
My brother-in-law is a huge sports nut. He knows everything about every Dodgers player since, the history of the team. My sister has never watched a Dodgers game in her life.
Right.
But you know what? Now she knows the players. They go to Dodgers games. And this was a point of
relationship good. So she's willing to do that for him, and he'll do something in return that she likes to do. That's the give and take of a relationship.
Exactly. So this is one point from the older generation that I think they were more into creating the relationship, whereas our generation is more into finding. Mm-hmm. But that's slightly different from the point that you brought up, Kim, which is like having certain must-haves and certain non-negotiables. Mm-hmm. Which I agree with you that you should have 3 or 4. The person must have these things, right? Like for me, they must be Jewish. That will never change. Right. And then you should have 3 or 4 non-negotiables, which are, I will not date someone who is, it could be smoker, has a temper, whatever.
Selfish.
Yeah. So it's important to have some must-haves, and it's important to have some non-negotiables. It's important that those lists not be laundry lists. They should be short and compact. And then it's important to have something in the middle called a willing. So I give my clients this exercise called a want, willing, won't. And you should sit down and do this. It's really interesting. Yeah. You sit down and you write out, what are all the things that I want? Unbridled, just write them all, everything, whatever. Then what are all of the things that I am willing to put up with? They're not ideal, but I'll tolerate them. For example, you may not want somebody who is bald, but you'll deal with it.
Right.
I may not want a girl who, is is long distance, but I'll deal with it, for example, right? And then you have your won't category, which is all the things you will not deal with. Forget about it. There's no way. And then what you want to do is you want to make the want and won't categories as short as possible, so that you're giving yourself the best chance.
Yeah.
Very
I
good.
think that's a great exercise.
The emphasis that we place on chemistry versus the emphasis that we place on shared values, good communication, shared vision of the future is totally disproportionate. So, it's very important to have a strong connection with your partner, but the connection that you feel to them has to be preceded by making sure that you guys are aligned in terms of your values and the way you talk to each other and everything. Because otherwise you get in a situation where you feel this insane chemistry and you just want to kiss them and hug them and talk to them all the time. But then you look back at your want, willing, won't, which you wrote when that person wasn't in the picture, and you're like, damn, this person is none of these things, but now I feel so emotionally attached to them.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm going to flip it now, because this is the problem I run into the most. They fit the willing, won't, whatever, but there is no chemistry or connection. Then
yes,
what?
That's tough too.
Yeah.
So here's what I always say. Just because you have a passionate connection with someone does not mean you are meant to be with them. And just because somebody is perfect on paper does not mean you are meant to be with them. Mm-hmm. Right? So perfection is an illusion. They're not going to be perfect on paper, and you may not have a perfect, passionate connection with them. But as long as you have some elements of both, you have some connection and they share some of the things that you want on paper, then that's, that's kind of the gold standard.
Right. Mm-hmm. It's a basis.
Yeah. Well, there's so many interesting
Kevin's terrific.
Yeah, you're great. I would talk all day, but I want to play our game that we play. So
otherwise we'll keep him on the phone forever.
Oh, sure.
So
thank you guys.
We're going to play this game that we play with all of our guests called Grandma Gail's Old Fashioned Dating Quiz. I think I know where you're going to land, but we go
I love it. Okay.
Some hypotheticals, and then we will deem whether you're more traditional or more of a modern dater.
Oh, okay. Great.
Okay. So the first one is, do you prefer a call or a text from the person you're dating if it's just to say hi?
Call.
Would you sleep with someone on the first date?
No.
Dating apps or setups?
Setups.
Move in together before you get engaged, or wait until you're like engaged or married to move in?
Can't say a hard and fast rule, but ideally, if all things being equal, wait until engagement.
Oh God, Kevin, he's exactly in my camp.
Okay, last one. Who should pay for the date? Should it be one person who always takes care of it, or like split, alternate?
So look, I obviously am more traditional. My view on this one is that I prefer for the guy to pay for dates. If there comes a point in the relationship where the girl also wants to treat him, that is fine. But I prefer that one person picks up the tab. I'm not really a fan of going Dutch.
Okay.
Yeah, like 5 out of 5 traditional. Someone just did that too, a girl.
Yeah, but it was very interesting. We had a young woman on recently who, is gay, and we asked her the same question and about picking, who picks up the check. And she said, since they're two women, it really doesn't matter, which is very interesting. I didn't
right.
it that way. But she said whoever initiates the date, that's how she said it should pay.
Yeah. Or like just
right.
in a relationship, like they ended up taking their own role and like one person usually does, but yeah, it's a little like murkier since it's not like, these are all societal, like,
right.
things.
Yeah.
So I mean, here's a difficult thing. Like everything that you asked me about my personal value set, it's all very heteronormative.
Yeah, exactly.
Because I'm I'm not white, but I'm a straight man who's traditional and chivalrous, and I try to help women. What's that?
It's the kind of guy I like.
Oh, thank you, Gail. But I just want to be clear, like I have gay clients, I have trans clients, I have clients, I have men who are in open relationships and they're polyamorous, right? So I never impose my personal value set on the people that I'm working with, on my friends. If you ask me what are my personal opinions, I will tell you, which is everything that I've shared in this podcast. And a lot of it I apply to my coaching because I see what works in the long run and what doesn't, right? But also my job as a coach is to be adaptable and not tell my client what I think they should do. My job as a coach is to help my client identify what they feel in their own heart is right, and then encourage them to do that. And what I have found over and over again, Kim and Gail, but I'm mostly talking to you, Kim, as my peer. What I have found over and over again is that people in our generation, truly what we want in our heart is actually more aligned with traditional standards than it is with modern standards. The reason that so many people in our generation abide by modern standards of life, career, money, dating, marriage, is that these are the messages that we've received, and this is what we have been conditioned to believe works as par for the course of being in this generation. But when it comes down to our emotional needs and what fulfills us and what we actually dream of, it is usually more aligned with traditional practices, because those traditional practices have, for the most part, worked for hundreds of years, and they've been installed in our DNA.
I just wonder then that, like, I'm thinking back to when you said before of like, our generation now feels like our lives have to be like set and ready and like at the like perfect time in career, like family, whatever else it is, to then find your person and be in that place. If we don't say that and you're like, you can meet someone whenever, then what does that say about like the timing being right and like one person's timing being off and one person's timing working?
So first of all, the right person at the wrong time is the wrong person.
Right.
Unfortunately.
That, though.
No, it is because the stars are not aligned. You're not
exactly.
One of the people is not ready. So both people have to be on board to form a relationship, no matter what age you are. You could be 20, and if both people love each other, it'll work. If you're 30 and you can't find two people who think along the same lines, then it's not working. I think it has little to do with age. It's more really finding the right person who'll click with you and your value system.
First of all, Kim, let's say you and I meet, you're 26, I'm 30, and God has decreed that you and I are soulmates, okay? And you're the person that I am supposed to end up with. We are perfect for each other, okay? But I am in a place in my life where I am really struggling emotionally. I don't have a job. I don't know what my next moves are in life. Maybe in the metaphysical sense, I am still the right person. But if it's the wrong time, the end result is that I'm the wrong person for you, right? And you can't wait around for me to get my stuff together, right? So that's what I mean when I say the right person at the wrong time should be treated as the wrong person, right? Unless you have history together and you're going through something and you're trying to like help each other, okay? But the thing that you said, about when you said, going back to what we were talking about earlier, you do not have to be 100% in order to find love. You are not supposed to be 100% in order to find love. This era places such an emphasis on having your career set up, having your life set up, being emotionally self-reliant, being perfect on your own, and then you find somebody else as an addendum to your life. And I'm here to tell you that from an emotional and psychological perspective, that is not how it works. Now, Gail, you said earlier, you can't rely on someone else to fix all of your inadequacies. Totally, right? If you're only 20% on your own and you've got a laundry list of issues and demons, don't get into a relationship, right?
Exactly. You got to fix yourself first.
So here's what it comes down to. Would you step onto a plane that you knew had a gas leak or a broken wing? No, right? So you shouldn't date somebody whose life is totally a mess.
Yeah.
Would you invite a passenger onto your plane that you knew had a gas leak or a broken wing? No, because you'd be endangering their life. So you should not invite someone into your life if that's where you are.
Mm-hmm.
But your plane doesn't have to be a 747 decked out in gold.
Mm-hmm.
It just has to be safe enough to fly.
Mm-hmm.
And as long as your plane is safe enough to fly, then you've got one pilot and one co-pilot, and the two of you can fly around the world together and improve the plane and make a beautiful life, right? What we don't need is two gorgeous, state-of-the-art F-17 fighter pilot jets rolling up to the tarmac, ready to fly next to each other.
Very good analogy.
I love
Terrific.
that.
I
It's so
love
true.
this.
It's so
I love
true.
it.
Yeah. I feel like let's end on that note because we all agreed.
Yeah, we love that.
Good.
I loved it.
Kevin,
Good, I'm glad.
thank you so much for
Thank
joining
you.
us. Tell everyone how they can follow you and sign up to work with you if they want.
Sure, thank you. So my Instagram is my name, Kevin Nahai, Nahai, and my website is kevinnahai.com. And please feel free to reach out if you want, a free chat just to get to know each other, even if you're not interested in coaching, but you just liked some of the things that I said. I'm a friend to all listeners of Excuse My Grandma.
Hope you guys liked the episode with Kevin Nahai.
He's so nice. He really is a nice guy. So it would be worth listening to for those people to follow him because he's really got some really good ideas.
Yes. And you know how to follow us on TikTok and Instagram. We're at Excuse My Grandma. And we will see you next week.
Bye.